Last time on Freaky What? A small town in Iowa shaken to its core when 8 people are brutally murdered with an axe. A murderer on the loose and police searching for answers. Why would someone do this to an average middle-class family, and will they be caught? Stay put to find out these answers and hear the rest of this incredible story. Hi, I'm Hallow. Welcome to Freaky What. I love telling stories about mysteries, crime, paranormal, and anything else I think is freaky. I really appreciate you watching, and if you enjoy this channel, I hope you'll subscribe and watch my other stories. Now, let's get to it. The townspeople couldn't fathom who could commit such a heinous act. Initially, they suspected it might be a deranged drifter. People formed posses on horseback and in automobiles, scouring the city, checking alleys, and searching every nearby barn, shed, and outhouse, hoping to find the blood-soaked killer hiding nearby. However, their efforts yielded no results. As night fell, fear gripped the town, and the possibility that a madman might strike again loomed large. Families banded together with their neighbors, standing guard throughout the night with shotguns, and nailed their windows shut. Locks became scarce as residents scrambled to secure their homes. Trust among neighbors eroded, rumors and accusations ran rampant, and the town was in turmoil. Soon, newspaper reporters and private detectives descended upon Villisca, while bloodhounds were brought in to assist with the investigation. Law enforcement agencies from neighboring counties and states joined forces in the hunt for the perpetrator. The Villisca Axe Murders set in motion a series of events that tore the small town apart and forever altered the lives of its residents. One of the first ideas that investigators considered was the possibility of a serial killer. The year before, in the Midwest, a series of gruesome murders had occurred. In the fall of 1911, families were being brutally killed in their beds every 2 weeks, and there didn't seem to be any clear reason for these horrifying acts. These included the Burnham and Wayne families in Colorado Springs in September, followed by the murder of another family in Monmouth, Illinois, just 2 weeks later. It all culminated in the Showman family's murder in Ellsworth, Kansas on October 15, 1911. The following year, in Paola, Kansas, another similar murder took place on June 5, 1912, just 4 days before the Villisca murders. Despite the eerie similarities between these brutal killings, the theory of a serial killer soon lost traction and was largely forgotten. Suspicion also fell on any strangers or drifters passing through the small town. This led to a major break in the case and a lead that seemed oddly suspicious. His name was Andy Sawyer, a transient worker who moved from one job to another. On the morning of the murders, he had secured temporary employment with the Burlington Railroad. According to his fellow rail workers, Sawyer bought a newspaper that had headlines about the Villisca murders and seemed unusually interested in it. They also noted that he slept with his clothes on and kept an axe nearby, and he was a solitary figure. Afterward, he talked extensively about the Villisca murders and whether the killer had been caught. He even confided in the crew foreman that he had been in Villisca on that Sunday night and was worried that he might be considered a suspect, so he left the town. The crew's foreman, Thomas Dyer, grew very suspicious of Sawyer's behavior and handed him over to the sheriff on June 18, 1912. Dyer later testified that before turning Sawyer in, he observed him rubbing his head with both hands. Suddenly, Sawyer jumped up and muttered to himself, "I will cut your heads off," while mimicking striking motions with an axe and hitting piles in front of him. Although Sawyer's name frequently came up during grand jury testimonies, he was eventually cleared as evidence revealed that he had been in Osceola, Iowa on the night of the murder. His alibi was airtight because he had been arrested for vagrancy at 11 p.m. that evening, making it impossible for him to have been in Villisca at the time of the crime. As the investigation continued, the attention shifted towards people within the local community, and a few potential suspects came into the spotlight. The town's residents, caught up in speculation, began to point fingers at those they believed might have committed the crime. This unfounded suspicion caused rifts in friendships, and in many cases, those friendships were damaged beyond repair. One of the initial suspects was Lee Van Gilder, who happened to be Sarah's former brother-in-law through her sister Mary. Lee had a history of violence and had run-ins with the law before. There was also some bad blood between him and the Moore family, particularly due to his past relationship with Mary. However, it was later determined that he was not involved in the crime. When looking for motives, the authorities turned their attention to Frank F. Jones, a well-known businessman and Iowa state senator. Josiah Moore had worked for Frank Jones as a top salesman at Jones of Villisca, a hardware and implement store, for several years. However, in 1907, Josiah decided to start his own business, becoming a direct competitor to Frank Jones. What made matters worse was that Josiah took the highly sought-after John Deere franchise with him when he left. This fierce competition and the resulting rivalry had grown so intense that by 1910, Josiah and Frank wouldn't even speak to each other and would go out of their way to avoid each other in the street. Investigators didn't think that Frank Jones would personally commit the crime. Instead, they turned their attention to a man named William Mansfield after they had received information suggesting that Senator Frank F. Jones might have hired him to kill the Moore family. In July 1916, Mansfield was arrested in Kansas City, Kansas, and brought back to Iowa to appear before a Montgomery County grand jury. Many people in the local community expected Mansfield to be formally charged and put on trial. However, the grand jury decided not to indict him because they found that his alibi checked out. Meanwhile, Frank Jones lost his bid for re-election as a senator, but he was never charged with any crime related to the murders. Another person of interest was Reverend George Kelly, a wandering preacher who happened to be teaching at the Children's Day event held at the Presbyterian Church attended by the Moore family on June 9, 1912. Reverend Kelly had a reputation for being a bit unhinged and was rumored to have inappropriate inclinations toward minors, though this wasn't what made investigators look into him. What raised suspicions about Kelly was his unsettling obsession with the murder. He sent a series of lengthy, rambling letters to state and local investigators, private detectives, and even the victims' relatives. 2 weeks after the crime, during his next visit to Villisca, he planned to spend the night and visit the murder house on a Monday. Within a month, authorities started looking into him further, discovering that he had been peering into a woman's bedroom just days before the murder, and he had been seen wandering the streets late at night in several towns. He had also made inappropriate requests for young women to pose for him on at least 3 occasions. His mental state appeared to be disturbed, as evidenced by his fixation on inappropriateness and sending a blood-stained shirt for cleaning a week after the murder. Kelly was arrested on April 1917. As his trial approached, state officials made one last attempt to extract a confession from him. After an extended session of questioning, on August 31, 1917, Kelly dictated a confession. In it, he claimed that on the night of the murder, he had trouble sleeping and decided to go for a walk. During this walk, he said he saw the Stillinger girls getting ready for bed through their window, and he claimed to have heard the voice of the Lord telling him to let the children come to me. The trial started on September 4th, 1917, but it was dismissed on September 28th because the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict. 11 jurors voted for acquittal and 1 dissented. A second trial in November resulted in Kelly being found not guilty of all charges. By the time the trial began, most people in Montgomery County believed that Kelly was being framed as part of a conspiracy led by Frank Jones. They suspected that Jones had tried to use his money and influence to manipulate the jury. Another person considered a suspect was Henry Lee Moore, no relation to Josiah Moore. He was believed to be a serial killer. Several months after the Villisca murders, Henry was convicted of killing his mother and grandmother with an axe. He was also suspected of being behind the murders in Colorado Springs, Colorado, as well as those in Ellsworth and Paola, Kansas. The similarities between these cases led some to believe that a single individual was responsible, but this connection was never definitively proven. Ultimately, in 1917, the police and investigators gave up their pursuit. Sadly, the murders remain unsolved and the perpetrator was never brought to justice. Today, the victims of the mysterious axe murders rest in Villisca Cemetery, and the infamous murder house still stands as a haunting reminder of this unsolved mystery. Do you believe that one of these suspects committed the crimes and then got away with it? Why was no one convicted of this horrific crime? Let me know what you think about this mystery in the comments. Thank you so much for watching today, sharing, and commenting. I couldn't do this without you, and I really appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you again soon.